Hey guys, so in this video I'm going to talk about 3 things that we do that nobody else does, or I believe nobody else does them. You know, make sure you let me know in the comments if you do these things. But before we get into that, if you're new to my channel, I come out with 2 concrete videos a week. Please consider subscribing if you like concrete stuff. Plus, you'll also be automatically entered into a drawing for some of the gear that we wear, these hoodies with the straight out of concrete stuff, t-shirts, or a hat. All you got to do is put in new sub in the comments and obviously subscribe to the channel. Now, one of the things I believe that we do that nobody else does, I've never heard of anybody else doing this, is not only do we use water reducer in the concrete, but we also add accelerator to the concrete late in the fall like it is right now when temperatures are starting to get really cold. So there's just a high of 50 today. And the overnight temps get into the 30s now where we live in Maine. So in order to get the concrete to set up, you know, number one, we don't want to use a lot of water, but we still want to have a loose mix so it's easy to work with. That's where the water reducer comes in. But then we put some accelerator in the concrete too, because without that, the concrete's just going to sit here, stay soft, not cure, and it's going to take forever to get a finish on it. So we use the accelerator with the water reducer. And as you can see, you know, once you get used to this, like, you do have a certain amount of working time with this. You got to know that for sure. But once you get used to it, it's a pretty good combination. And as you wait for the end of the video here, make sure you stay to the end. You're going to see we're going to be able to get right back on this in almost no time at all to start finishing the concrete. So another thing, the second thing we do that I haven't seen anybody else do on any other concrete videos is we spin the chute like that. The very last chute on the truck, hook it the other way, and then we can deflect the concrete when we pour over the wall like this and not have to use a tremie or just not let it drop very far so it splatters everywhere and makes a mess. And this is a really convenient way to pour concrete over the wall like this. I suppose you could even do footings like this if you tried. We don't do footings, but it seems like it would work if you're doing footings too. And there's just enough room in between. The way it hooks, it'll only go, you know, back itself towards that foundation wall so far, and then you can also swing it towards, like where I'm holding it, you can swing it back that way quite a ways. But if you swing it back that way too far, then the concrete's just going to drop and it's not going to deflect off the chute. But it makes it really convenient for spreading out the concrete. And what we found, if the concrete driver, if he runs his drum fast enough, it actually goes a little bit smoother than if he runs it really slow and the concrete's just like trickling down the chute. So that's kind of the second thing that we do that I don't see that anybody else does. We'll talk about the third thing here just in a minute, but I want to just let you guys watch this pour a little bit. I kind of left the pour in real time. I cut out a couple of little dead spots here and there, but based on the time of the pour here in the video is kind of like all it took us to get this thing poured. I'll go over the third thing real quick here since we're just watching. The third thing that we do that I don't think hardly anybody else does is we're basically a 3-man crew. You know, at this time of year, we don't have the summer help, the school teachers back teaching school. We will split up the crew. That's the reason there's only 2 of us here. We will split up the crew and pour 2 floors in one day, just so we can get jobs done, because we have such a long list of jobs to do, and we know that in the fall the days are limited and usually the weather starts turning on us, so we got to try to get as much done as possible before the snow flies. So this morning, early in the morning, this is actually about 10 a.m. in the morning, early in the morning at 6:30 we poured a garage floor and we left Darren on that floor. So he's up there wherever town that is in. It was about a half an hour away from here, and he's power troweling that floor by himself. He'll get it all power troweled, sawed, so he can finish that floor. And Luke and I came here, waited for the concrete truck to show up, and as you can see, we're getting a second job done today. So we'll try to do as many of these 2 pour jobs in a day as we can, just to try to keep up with the demand of floors that we do have. And we don't want to get into pouring too many floors where they have to deck these things over. Number one, there's usually not power on site, so it's really dark once they deck it over. And you got to run a generator. And then you're trying to finish concrete in a space where there's hardly any ventilation. Now on a floor like this, most of the time we'll just hand finish this. We'll just mag it out, and then we'll hand steel trowel it 2 or 3 times, get it really smooth. You're going to see something that happened a little bit differently on this one. It was actually kind of a blessing in disguise, I think, but for the most part, as the temperatures start getting colder and the concrete doesn't quite set up as good as it does in the summer, we'll hand finish a lot more floors. Whether we have to, hit them with a power trowel a couple times in advance and then just wipe it out, or just from start to finish. Like this for us would be a start to finish. Would get on it with skids, as you'll see in a minute here. We'll get on it with skids. We'll start to hand float it out. We'll make sure the drain's cut down and matched really good. And then we'd go around it, just steel trowel it probably 2 or 3 times, and this thing would be done. We'll cut a joint across that bulkhead. But other than that, once they deck this thing over and stop building the house, must be a tiny house. We don't really get any information other than, the floor's ready, come do the floor, this is what you need. So this one, basically the only spec on it was not only just the concrete mix, but that it needed a 6 mil poly vapor barrier. So that was just the spec on this. It's got fiber mesh in it for reinforcement. But yeah, that's what the plan was here, especially where we're pouring later in the day. You can see Luke and I aren't exactly hurrying, even though it's got accelerator in it. We can tell just by pulling the concrete around, by walking through it, what the setup on the concrete feels like as we're getting it poured. You can tell if it's hot or not. And this felt pretty good to us. If it felt hot, we'd definitely be hustling a little quicker than what we're doing right now. But from doing this, working in Maine, where October, November, temperatures start getting pretty chilly, you start having to add accelerator. We'll use accelerators from October all the way back into the 1st of May. So for like 6 months out of the year, we're adding accelerators into the concrete. Even when the concrete has warm water or hot water pouring outside in freezing cold temperatures, you still need to add accelerators. So we're pretty used to extreme weather concrete, I guess you could call it. Whereas, where you pour, I guess extreme weather concrete could be both ways, right? When it's really, really cold or when it's really hot. And we do get some hot weather here in Maine. You wouldn't think so, but we'll have temperatures that'll reach 100 degrees right in the middle of summer. So we kind of have to deal with all different types of weathered concrete, from spring, summer, fall, and winter, which gives us the full scope of just all the different types of mixes we need to use and chemicals we need to use to get it to set up. There I am with the flipping the chute thing again. Now he could be running the concrete a little faster. That would actually make it a little easier here. This is kind of what I mean by just letting it trickle down the chute. If it's running faster and I move the bottom of that chute towards Luke a little bit, I could actually get the concrete up against the wall and he wouldn't even have to pull it there. That little red thing in the middle, that's a center drain. The whole basement, we decided to slope to the center drain. It's about 3/4 to an inch lower than the outside wall. The outside wall, we snapped a chalk line on it, so we had a laser down in here. We shot our grades, marked the walls, snapped a chalk line, and that's what we're using to mag the edges by. And then we also cut the pipe. The pipe in the middle was just sticking straight up. We cut that off, put the drain on, taped over it, set it to grade, and that's how we got that where it is. And that has about an inch slope, I'd say, even though it doesn't really look like it, it does. Now we're a sub on this job. We're sub to do the floor from the guys that did the foundation. I don't usually, most of these jobs that we're subbed on like this, like I won't even get to meet the homeowner. Sometimes I'll get to meet the builder if they just happen to be on site. But generally it's kind of like this. We just show up, nobody's here, we get our job done. You know, we get our job done in a day, and then we leave, and then that's it for us. We don't come back. We're on to the next job on the next day. If I wanted to mag that edge where I'm coming down, that's me in the yellow, I wanted to touch that edge up right there where we were going to a drain, make sure that's the slope on that from the outside wall down to the drain was just right. And I can kind of feel that in the concrete, and I can see it also. So I decided to stop Screed for a second, get my mag float out, make sure that had the right slope to it with no little humps or dips in it. There, now when I score, we call it scoring on the edge of the Screed rod when we watch it. When I score, I know that the slope is going to be perfect. Now don't forget to subscribe. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. You'll be entered into a drawing to get some gear like us, the straight out of concrete gear. We got them in. Luke's wearing a gray sweatshirt right now. We got t-shirts like that. We got black ones that are like that. I even have it on the yellow stuff. I got my hashtag DEWALT hoodie on right now. But even in the yellow ones, we got the straight out of concrete. That's pretty cool. You'll be entered into the drawing to win that. You just got to put new sub in the comments. Don't forget about that. So we're going to go, even though they poured, when they did the footing in that little bulkhead, there's a little bulkhead behind me, or kind of where the bull float handles are going into, that we'll finish up in. They poured the full footing across the bulkhead, so it kind of has a floor in it already, and we're going to just go over it with this one. There's about 2 to 2.5 inches of concrete over that. And what we'll end up doing right where the basement meets the bulkhead with the floor is we'll cut a joint right across there, because you know it's going to crack there. So we'll cut that in with a hand joiner while we're down there on our skids, and that should take care of any shrinkage on those exterior or those interior corners, I guess, if you want to call them, and it'll make the floor crack right across that door. Now at this point, you know, we're 15, 20, 25 minutes into the pour probably, and we can start to feel the accelerator working. You can feel it on your boots. You can feel the slump changing a little bit as we're screeding it here. Definitely not so much that we're worried about it or worried about getting it down, but you know, from start to finish here, you know, 20, 25 minutes or whatever, that's kind of all it takes sometimes. And it will depend on how far away the concrete truck had to come from the concrete plant to the job site. It'll depend on, you know, the actual temperature, the air temperature. It'll depend on if you're in the sun or if you're in the shade. And it'll also depend on if the concrete driver spins his drum, like what rate or what speed, how many RPMs is he spinning his drum at while he's in transit on the way to the job site. The drum of the concrete truck should barely be spinning on the way to the job site. It should just be creeping in a circular motion. That's it. A lot of guys I'll see, they got that thing spinning so fast, like I can't imagine why they would want to spin it that fast, you know. If you think about it, the concrete in the truck is my concrete. I'm paying for it. And don't spin it so much that when you show up it's so hot it's really hard to work with, is how I feel. Just leave the concrete plant and turn that thing on as slow as you can with a slight creep and leave it that way. And then when it gets to the job site, when you get to the job site with your concrete truck, I'll decide how much water I want to put in it. I'll decide how much accelerator I want to put in it, because I'm the one that's paying for the concrete. Like, don't make those decisions for me. Let the guy paying for it make those decisions. So there's that little bulkhead. That's a really tiny little bulkhead. But there'll be a little set of stairs in there, I guess, so they can get into the house from the outside, in the basement anyway. And Luke's just going to finish that up. Basically, he's just going to mag float his way out of there. That has a chalk line in there too. So he'll mag all the edges to the chalk line. And we'll drop that ladder back down in there, and he can kind of use the rake, or we call it a come along. A lot of guys call it a rake, to kind of float out his footprints. A couple last passes with the bull float. The reason the bull float's so shiny, that's not a new bull float. That thing's really old, but we took the grinder to it. It had a lot of concrete stuck to it. So we took the grinder to it to clean it while we was waiting for the concrete truck to show up. And it feels now like it weighs half as much as it used to. I think what I'm going to do to it now that it's nice and clean is I'm going to put a coating of our polyaspartic over it to really seal it up, make it easier to clean. Alright, so this is basically how we get out of a bulkhead with a ladder, or even out of an 8-foot wall, tall foundation like this if we have to jump out of a corner or something. This is basically the same way every time. We try to get out in a spot where it's a little more inconspicuous, like the bulkhead. You know, that area he's in right now eventually will be covered with stairs. Even though we're going to finish that still, we'll finish that the same as we do the floor. But it is good that it's all covered. So this was about 30 minutes after we got done pouring. You know, we cleaned up everything, got all the tools back on the truck. We actually had a few minutes to hang out and just wait around a little bit. But the concrete's setting up pretty fast, especially for a cold, chilly day with no sun. That's what using the accelerator with the water reducer helps. You know, you have no bleed water. Even though we use poly here, there's no bleed water that comes to the surface that you got to wait for it to evaporate, or you got to squeegee off. And the concrete sets up pretty good even without warm water or hot water in it. Now the one thing, like, we did come down and check this a little bit earlier, probably 15 minutes earlier, and it kind of felt a little too soft based on setting that plywood down and putting the ladder on it. So we gave it about 15 more minutes, which is right now when we're jumping down, and yeah, we can work it up. Like, we had planned just to do this by hand on these skids, maybe go over it 2 or 3 times. We can work up the concrete, like, it is soft enough to work up, but it's actually really firm. And what we decided to do, because I have my truck with a crane and a power trowel in there, a small 30-inch power trowel, is we decided after we get some of these edges done and cut down around the drain, that's what we're talking about right now, is, hey, let's just throw the power trowel down. Why kill ourselves? Concrete's a little bit firmer than what we expected. We'll just use the power trowel to work everything up and get it hit this one time. And then we'll just chase it out by hand with the steel trowel and get it nice and smooth. So that's kind of what's coming up here real quick, is you're going to get to see me drop the power trowel down into Luke. He's going to hit this thing, and then I'm going to pick the power trowel right back up out of there with the crane, and he's going to finish it just by wiping it out by hand with the steel trowel. Now what I'm doing is, whenever you pour around a drain, it never like matches perfectly when the concrete's wet, what we call wet or loose, or as you're pouring it. There's always usually a little bit of high around the drain, and we like to match the concrete floor right to the edge of the drain perfectly. So this is what we call cutting down around the drain. We'll scrape out that high, and then we'll just mag it smooth. And make it match perfectly. Everything looks really good when we're all done, and you remove the tape off the drain. And then, you know, obviously if you had any water on the floor, you want the water just to flow right easily into the drain. So that might be something we do a little differently than most people too. I know we've already gone over the 3 things. One of them is water reducer with the accelerator. The other one was, you know, splitting up and doing 2 pours in a day when we can. That was another one. I'm filling in right now where that plywood was, because the first time we put it down there, it was a tiny little bit soft. So that sunk into the floor, you know, 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch, and I'm filling all that back in, making it smooth. You can see it's a little windy today, and there's leaves everywhere. The leaves are falling off the trees, which kind of makes it a pain in the butt. I guess it could be a lot worse. That thing could be filling up with leaves. Well, that's how we finish a lot of our floors when it comes late in the fall. Now, there'll be a couple other videos popping up right here. Make sure you check both of these out. Also, if you're new, remember hit subscribe. You'll be entered into a drawing to win some gear like we have on right now. And we'll see you in the next one, guys.